Hey everyone, and welcome back to this edition of the Political Correct Podcast. I'm Jim Williams, your host, and I could not be more pleased to welcome back my partner in crime, Alan J. Steinberg. Alan is one of the most insightful voices, not only in Republican politics, but in the entire political arena. He's been involved in campaigns most of his adult life. He has served as the regional administrator of Region 2 of the Environmental Protection Agency during the administration of former President George W. Bush, and as an executive director of the New Jersey Meadowlands Commission under former New Jersey Governor Christie Whitman. Alan, welcome back, my friend.
Delighted to be here with you this morning, Jim.
You know, Alan, we are at the end of the week, which is why we like doing these things at the end of the week, because we can, kind of take what we've seen over the weekend and try for the listeners to give them just truth of what is going on out there. We're not going to spin something left. We're giving you factually what's going on. And the blockbuster thing that hit in the last 24 hours came from what we know, the writer for the Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, and Jeff, incredible piece and insightful piece about President Trump's view of the military and military service. I'm going to tee you up here, bud. You read Jeff's piece. Your thoughts?
Jim, I try to keep the politics of my life as much as possible away from the personal. And this is one of those cases where it's very hard to do, because the difference between Trump and a lot of political figures with whom I differ severely is that he not only is offensive to me in terms of the way a president should conduct himself, he offends every sense of values that I have. In this case, the values of patriotism and the values of appreciation of the sacrifice of our patriotic fallen and wounded heroes of the past and present. Now, Trump people have a tendency of just being dismissive of all the evidence that is in front of them. They will come up with every excuse in the world to say that the Jeffrey Goldberg piece isn't true, even though there has been a corroborative piece written now by Jim Laporta of Associated Press. There's nobody who can sincerely doubt this article. But Trump people will go to the ends of the earth to try to discredit. But I'll tell you what is on my mind this morning. I remember the administration of Richard Nixon. Now, Nixon could have been a great president. He had the foreign policy skills. He had the insights, the ability to communicate, although he was hardly a charismatic individual. But he put his personal ambition ahead of his patriotic values. In the case of Trump, there isn't even any sense of patriotic values. Nixon was a patriot who was loyal to our prisoners of war. He was loyal to those who had perished in the service of our country. He had served our country and enlisted during World War II, even though he could have gotten out of it as a Quaker, as a conscientious objector, but he served. But again, he put his ambition ahead of his patriotism. This is a man who is unworthy of being commander-in-chief. He's not going to be reelected, but we're going to go through.
Trump. We're speaking of Trump. So transition from Nixon to Trump. Just making sure, guys.
That's correct. I'm sorry. I'm glad you corrected that. Okay.
Yeah.
But again, Nixon was a person who was a human tragedy. There's nothing tragic about Trump. He is just plain evil. And he's going to lose this election. But we are going to go through 2 months of unbridled hell where this country is divided worse than ever before. And even if he loses substantially, which I believe he will, we are going to go through a period after that where he will try to make every excuse for discrediting the election and refusing to leave office. He is the greatest danger to American democracy since the inception of the Republic in 1776 and the Constitution in 1787. more of a danger than the Civil War was.
You know, Alan, one of the things that I did this week is I did on covering the campaigns over the years. Obviously, you and I are both in the midst of covering, the 2020 race. And I said that, I felt that Biden would win. I mean, in 2016, won a little, right around 3 million votes. I assume that Biden will be in that same ballpark, 3 million, plus or minus. It's still going to come down to the 270, the Electoral College. And I felt that because of what happened during 2018, when I was really focused on the swing states and specifically checking out the Detroit area, because remember that Michigan was swung by 12,000 votes in and around Detroit. And there were 75 attorneys in Detroit in 2018. There's going to be over 3,500 attorneys. In 2000, we had the situation with Gore and Bush, where everybody remembers the hanging chads, and I spent my life at that point 24 hours a day, just going through that situation of the recount. I can honestly see this election could be electorally, where where there's that this goes to litigation. It could be a month or so that we know who wins. Your thoughts?
It could. Yes, it could. Let me tell you what makes me confident that it at least will be resolved decisively. I know Steve Kornacki from his years of covering New Jersey. He's a friend of mine.
Sure.
And Steve was excellent.
Right?
Yeah, Steve has been on MSNBC. I always thought he was a good journalist. He's become a super journalist. The two leading election journalists in America right now, I feel, are Steve, who has a great macro knowledge of the election and the issues and the themes. The best micro student of elections is John King, who was on CNN. He can tell you every state, what parts of the state are in, what parts are going to influence. Mm-hmm. So between the two of them on election nights, I do a lot of switching. But Steve put it very well. And the pollsters were actually right in the year 2016. They called the election nationally for Hillary Clinton in the popular vote by 2 to 3%. It was just the distribution of that margin that enabled Trump to win in the Electoral College. If Biden wins by more than 5%, he will not lose in the Electoral College. I look at all the state-by-state polls and I can go crazy in all the data. But Steve made it simple for me. If it's more than 5%, Trump is going to lose. And right now, Biden is winning by 7% average in the polls. I think it's going to be more than that at the end. I think Biden had a terrific week. And I think that Trump had a terrible week because I'm going to be doing a column on this. The Trump message, the law and order message, is actually destructive to his campaign. This is not the racist nation that Trump supporters want it to be. It really is not. And I think that message is backfired, and I can get into that in depth at a later point.
Right. We'll get back to that later.
Yes, exactly. So I think that we will have a clear outcome at the end. But in between, as you quite properly said, we are going to have litigation. It's a good thing that the Democrats, and I'm not even a Democrat. I was a lifelong Republican, but I'm not going back to the Republican Party. It's a racist party anymore. I'm not necessarily joining the Democrats, but I'm backing just about every single Democrat in the country in this election. But I think we will have a decisive outcome. It's just that the next 2 months are going to be so bitter, so polluted by Trump, so destructive of norms that the Republic is going to find its social fabric rent. This is a profoundly evil man There has not been a man this evil that has ever occupied the White House.
Now, because of your relationship in New York, you're certainly familiar with the Kushner family.
I sure am.
You've got Jared and Stephen Miller, who basically are the de facto campaign surrogates and advisors for the president. They got one note, and it's not a good one. But, the one thing I want to just focus here on just for a moment before we break and come back with some lightning round stuff. I looked at, it's going to be 6 states and about 25 counties, okay? And we're going to channel our buddy Steve Kornacki here. Over on the Philadelphia side, it doesn't win if he doesn't win Pennsylvania. It doesn't happen. Now, for many years, Joe Biden was considered senator of the state of Pennsylvania because of Delaware's proximity to the to Philadelphia in the Delaware Valley. Let's talk about the Philly suburbs. I mean, Philly suburbs. Your family lives in the Philly suburbs. Can he pull off a win in Philadelphia?
Are you talking about Trump or Biden?
Pittsburgh. I'm talking about I'm talking about Pittsburgh and Philly. Trump first, then Joe Biden.
I don't think that Pennsylvania is out of reach yet for Trump. I think Biden will win. And the reason I think Biden will win is he's not going to make the mistake that Hillary Clinton made of just not paying sufficient attention to Pennsylvania at the end. I think the Philly suburbs have changed, as you know, over the years dramatically.
Sure,
they used to be a bedrock. They were a bedrock of republicanism for many years.
Right.
Western Pennsylvania, where I grew up at one time, was almost solidly Democratic. But Western Pennsylvania changed. If you ever watched the movie The Deer Hunter, and I can't watch that movie without crying, because I grew up in a suburb of Pittsburgh that was very much like Clarion, which was the location of The Deer Hunter. I went to school with guys who didn't have my advantages. I grew up in a middle-class family. I could go to college. I wasn't subject to the draft. And these friends of mine were killed in the war, many of them, or else wounded for life. So I was fortunate. That movie really hits home with me. But Trump, and this is the irony of it all, who is an anti-patriotic man, took advantage of the anger there was towards the government for many years among people who grew up in Western Pennsylvania, who were damaged by the closure of the steel mills. When I was a child, if you had a job in a steel mill or in Alcoa Aluminum in the suburb I lived in, New Kensington, you were in. You were really in great shape. You had a job with benefits. You could afford just about anything. A house, paying your mortgage was nothing. And all that went to hell. These suburbs of Pittsburgh are now permanent slums. The city of Pittsburgh has come back, but with a much lesser population. So the city sort of reflects a new America. It reflects the middle class, the educated middle class that is the backbone of the Democratic Party now. The suburbs and most of Western Pennsylvania, it's like Jim Carville said, it's like Alabama. It reflects whites without a college degree, white men and women without college degrees who are working class and have to struggle. That's why Trump does have support in Western Pennsylvania. Eastern Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania is pretty much Trump country to a large extent. The Philly suburbs, I think, will be pretty solid for Biden, and that's why I think Biden will win. I think Philadelphia, you're going to have a huge African-American vote, which you didn't have for Hillary. African-Americans supported Hillary, but not enthusiastically. The most enthusiastic support any white man ever received from African-Americans in this country was Bobby Kennedy. Now, Joe Biden is not beloved by African-Americans, but he's very much trusted. He's very much liked. They feel that he's liked. They feel he's a member of the family. And he will get out a big vote in Philadelphia, and that's why I think that he will carry Pennsylvania. But not by the margins that he will carry other swing states. I think he's going to carry Michigan by a big margin. I think Wisconsin by a big margin. Pennsylvania by a lesser margin. If Biden wins Florida, the rodeo's over. The ball game is over. I'm going to rely on that on you, Jim Williams. You're my Florida guy.
Well, right now, it all depends. Florida, and you know this as well as I do, Florida has been, in the past 5 election cycles, the margin of victory in Florida has been less than 2%, and in the last 3 cycles, it's been 1% or less. So that's how split Florida is, almost straight down the middle. In 2018, Andrew Gillum lost to Ron DeSantis by less than 30,000 votes. And Rick Scott, the former governor of the state, beat Bill Nelson, incumbent senator, by 20,000 votes. So, that again gives you a reflection of how close it's likely to be in Florida. It's a toss-up right now. I think Biden is in the polls, around 2-3%. I really don't pay attention to the polls because they really don't reflect what you and I have been down this road many, many times. We know.
Yes, we have. I feel like you and I are poll road travelers.
We're not. That's something I don't pay attention to. Road. I look at signs in people's yards. I look where the buzz is. Because people tell pollsters anything they want to hear, right? They're not as accurate. I really think Florida's going to be, again, be close. It can be, I can't honestly say what at this point in time. I would say at this particular moment, I think Trump will win a close victory in Florida. But there's, 2 months to go, and we'll see. But I do believe it's going to be close there. I agree with you about Michigan. Michigan's a little different situation. I've spoken to a number of people in Michigan who are, party people. One of the things you and I do that I think people need to take you behind the ropes here, folks, for a minute. You need to know what's going on literally around in these areas. As I said before, there's 6 states, there's 25, 27 counties. I talk to supervisor of elections in these counties. I talk to people who are, journalists who have covered the state and in some cases the county that we're talking about. And sometimes it's a radio guy or sometimes it's a TV guy. These people give you the honest appraisal of what they think is going to in those counties. And when you think about it, in a country of 330 million people, the fact that the presidency really, lies in 6 states and 23 or 24 counties, that gives you a real idea of the deal from the full Thomas Tip O'Neill, who said that all politics are local. And in this particular case, in these particular states, and it's very, very crucial. So we'll see. I'm going to take a quick break. When we return, lightning round for what's happened this weekend. Thank God I got my buddy Alan Steinberg as my man. We shall return. This is the Politically Incorrect Podcast. Hey, folks. Let's talk a little bit about my new friends at Ground News. Now, it's an app that I've got on my phone, and we're all newsies, right? Let's be honest. You wouldn't be listening to the Politically Incorrect Podcast if you didn't like the news. And, one of the things we like about the news, or we hope to like about the news, is that the news is not BS, that we know that the news we're getting is real news and not news that has a slant to it one way or the other. Well, there's a way to make certain that you know that the news you are getting, where it's coming from, whether it's slanted one way or the other. Look, in many ways, all news, in some ways, are biased, right? And reporters may add biased language consciously or unconsciously, but the outcome's the same. You get biased news, and it impacts how you see the world. Now, Ground News is a brand new app, and it's easy to get it at the Google Play Store. You can get it at the App Store for those of you who are on the Apple devices, and it's free. You can download it. It provides readers with objective data about the underlying political bias in published news stories. Now, again, as we said before, either consciously or unconsciously, there is always a little bit of bias. But how much and where's it coming from? Well, that's what Ground News does. Ground News synthesizes this for you and breaks it down in a fascinating way. It's truly fascinating. It's, frankly, it's a groundbreaking first ever news comparison platform. There's nothing like it. Ground News collects data from over 50,000 news sources, runs it in real-time media bias tracking. Then the coverage bias rating is given visually shown alongside the story. So for every story you read, you can compare how reporting differs across sources with different political biases, see if the coverage of the story skews more to the left or to the right. Hopefully, it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, this is a news person's dream, okay? This is geek out stuff, okay? You guys are going to freak out about it. It is so much fun. Ground News represents the larger movement of people who, frankly, are fed up with traditional high politicized news. No one wants to be spoon-fed ideas, suddenly influenced. No way. Don't want that. Ground News gives power to the people so you can make up your own mind. And look, if I know anything about you folks who follow us on the Politically Incorrect podcast, you all have your own minds. I've been on Twitter with you. I know. This, my friends, is going to be something you're going to have a lot of fun with. But at the same time, and I really don't want this to go unnoticed, at the same time you're having fun and being able to really use their little meter to decide which, where's it coming from? Is this a highly conservative publication? Is it a highly liberal publication? Where is it on the spectrum? It is a lot of fun, but more importantly, you know where that news is coming from, and you know how close to the middle it really is. And look, that's all you can ask for, folks. But I'll tell you what, because Ground News are such cool people, and because they like the Politically Incorrect podcast, they're going to give us a deal. All right. So all this information, by the way, is going to be in the show box below, but pay attention. Okay. You ready? All you want to do right now is head over to ground.news/my last name Williams. That's ground.news/my last name Williams, WILLIAMS. Enter the code my name Williams to get 1 month free of Ground News Pro as an exclusive limited time offer. Listeners to the Politically Incorrect podcast will get 20% off. That's 20% off Ground News Premium memberships. Okay? Let me repeat that. For those of you who listen to us right here on the Politically Incorrect podcast, you're going to get 20% off Ground News Premium membership. So that's something you're going to want. So what are you waiting for? Start judging the truth for yourself and start today. That's right. Go out to ground.news/Williams. That's ground.news/Williams. Enter the promo code Williams. Get 1 month free of Ground News Pro. And for a limited time, you can get 20% off Ground News Premium memberships. All right. So look, folks, all the information is in the show box below. Go there now. Sign up. Ground News. You're going to want it. You're going to need it as we get through the next 65 days trying to decide just exactly who's telling the truth in the media. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Politically Incorrect Podcast. I'm Jim, along with my wingman, Alan Steinberg. You know, you're someone who knows a little bit about election law. The United States in North Carolina, then again in Pennsylvania and in Texas in the last 48 hours, has suggested the concept of go ahead and send your mail-in ballot in, but if you're not sure whether it's been counted, which of course you would never know, go ahead and go to the polls and vote too. So his concept is vote twice. Now, Bill Barr, the Attorney General of the United States, when asked by Wolf Blitzer on CNN about this, said he didn't know North Carolina election law. Well, is it not true that no matter what state you are in the country, you can't vote twice?
It's a felony. It's an
Right.
absolute felony. And now we have a United States president who is guilty of soliciting the commission of a felony. That in itself, under normal circumstances, with normal senators who weren't sycophantic supplicants the way the Republicans are in the U.S. Senate, would be enough to impeach and remove a president from office. But with these folks, they've turned nature on its head. I have to say this about Bill Barr. He's the worst attorney general in my lifetime. He makes John Mitchell, who I thought was the worst, he makes him look like Robert Kennedy, who was the best. So we have a terrible situation right now with Bill Barr, and Donald Trump is going to encourage throughout this campaign the commission of all sorts of violations of the rule of law because he has no respect for the rule of law, which makes him a further danger to our democracy. But that's what we're going to be living with for the next 60 days.
Real quick, for those of you who don't know, John Mitchell was the Attorney General under Richard Nixon and went to prison for his exploits.
Yes, he did.
Little fact check there for those of you who John Mitchell is. Now you do.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Not a problem. It's what I'm here to do. Basically, let's talk a little bit now, Alan, about contrast. We have President Trump, who went to Kenosha, where obviously there's been some protesting, unrest after the shooting of Jacob Blake, and met with the police. He chose not to meet with local, the mayor or the local aldermen and civic leaders. Less than 24 hours later, you had Joe Biden, who came in, met with the leaders, and also privately met with the family and spoke to Jacob for about 50 minutes on the phone. There's been a contrast in there, and let's talk a little bit about contrasting styles.
You know, I wrote an article last week when the Kenosha disturbances first occurred, when the shooting of Jacob Blake first occurred. And I wrote an article recommending very strongly that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris visit Kenosha. And this is before it even got in the news that Trump was considering it. And they should go there as the voice of reconciliation and at the same time take part in a nonviolent protest. It would send out two messages. Number one, that police brutality, racist police brutality would not be tolerated. But number two, that neither would violence. It would send up a powerful twofold message. And I was disturbed at first when Biden didn't immediately do that. I felt he should have. But it wasn't out of bad motives that he didn't. He was just concerned about the volatility of the situation. And when Trump announced that he was visiting Kenosha, I'll tell you the truth, I was a little worried about one thing. I thought that he might go to Kenosha and try to change the narrative of his campaign from being one of hostility towards African Americans to one of reconciliation. He had the opportunity to do that, but he didn't. He is totally into his message of oppressive, not nonviolent, not with egalitarian law and order, but with oppressive fear and hatred. That's his message. And he stuck to that message in Kenosha, which opened the door again for Joe Biden to visit Kenosha with Jill and come out as the voice of heartfelt reconciliation. I thought the whole week was a tremendous upsurge for the Biden campaign. They got their message out. And the one thing that the polls do show you significantly is that in two areas, Biden significantly outpolls Trump. And this is where I think the polls are relevant and are revealing. First of all, he's way ahead of Trump on the coronavirus situation. And I think that's what's going to decide the election ultimately, more than any other issue. But secondly, on the whole issue of the urban disturbances, it shows that Biden is way ahead of Trump in terms of handling of race relations. And I think the public overwhelmingly links race relations to the urban disturbance situation. And they will want a person who is adept at race relations in order to deal with it. And I think that that's where Biden further proved himself this week. I think he's going to win overwhelmingly. And I think that this week was a good start in that regard, although it is going to be, as I said before, 2 months of hell.
Yeah, I spoke early in the week prior to President Trump going to Wisconsin, and Governor Everett of the state of Wisconsin had suggested, because protesting was, and the area was so raw, that he felt that it might be inappropriate for the president to come at that particular point in time. Decided, regardless of whether Governor Evers, who was a Democrat, did or did not want him to be there, he would go. At the same, once President Trump went, Governor then said to former Vice President Biden that, if he wished to come, then obviously the president, no pun intended, had been set for people to come. So, that's how that formulation came. Let me just, let's go back a little bit. History. In 68, Nixon. In 80, Reagan. And now in 2020, there's been the quote-unquote law and order position. It's kind of like, well, in the case of President Trump, it's more than a dog whistle. It's pretty much a bullhorn. But it's kind of like, let me scare you into believing that there is such unrest in this country that somebody watching, in New Jersey, the fires going on in Kenosha, or some of the looting and situations that are going on in Portland, may very well be in their backyard, tomorrow. I don't think we can underestimate that the white fear narrative has been successful in the past. Now, whether it is in 2020 or not remains to be seen. But that quote unquote, we go back to the Ronald Reagan in 1980, had, as you remember, the silent majority that kind of took it over the top. are we running the risk? I'm asking at this point, are we running the risk of assuming there won't be a slide in some states? You can speak to Wisconsin very well because you went to school there. Let's talk a little bit about that. Is there the risk that it might with the people across the finish
line? I don't think so, not in the sense that it used to be. I think America has changed a great deal over the past 50 years. And let me go back to a point even earlier, because you have to separate Richard Nixon from George. You have to separate him from George Wallace, and you have to separate Reagan from Nixon. Now, George Wallace was an unabashed racist who later actually publicly atoned for his racism. But his was a nakedly racist appeal. But not only that, if he had ever been elected, and there was never any real chance of that, he would not have done anything about the underlying racial problems. Now, Nixon did make a racist law and order appeal. It was somewhat toned down from Wallace. It wasn't so blatant. But Nixon actually tried to do something about the underlying problems. He did have his biases against people of color, but he realized there were issues. Throughout his career, for example, Nixon, when he served under Eisenhower, tried to do something to give black contractors a greater share of the federal hiring largesse, give them a greater share of federal contracts. And he did this in office with the Philadelphia plan. So Nixon, as I said, in a lot of ways, his bark, which was harmful, was much worse than his bite. And he certainly was not, and he did a lot to integrate schools. If you look at the Justice Department during his years, they successfully integrated a lot of southern districts. So again, the bark of Nixon was far worse than the bite. Now, Ronald Reagan was the opposite. Reagan was a man without any racial bias, but he did play the race card. However, that wasn't his primary card. The primary card that Reagan played was the fact that after the Iran hostage crisis, America looked impotent in the face of the world. So he played up the feeling of American power, projection of American power. Our economy was in shambles at the time. And he used the idea, and I don't want to borrow a Trump phrase, when Trump said, make America great again, Reagan used the phrase morning in America. But it was a hopeful phrase. It wasn't built around such fear and hate. I remember the worst of it all, which was when I was at Northwestern in 1968. You had Wallace come to Cicero, Illinois, which is where Al Capone had lived. It was very much a racist town, and it was terrible. It was anti-Semitic, too. Theodore White, in his book, wrote about covering the events in Cicero. He didn't use his own name, but he talked about how he heard from anti-Semites in the crowd, hey, Moish, hey, Yahib, are you riding backwards? You know, stuff like that. The worst of anti-Semitic dialogue. But America has improved a lot, but we still have systemic racism, particularly in the police forces of this country. And the Republican Party, which I served my whole life for, has become a profit center for racism because of their voter suppression efforts. They see voter suppression as the way to remain in power in states like Georgia and other southern states. And that's why I left the Republican Party. I haven't joined the Democrats, but I won't be a part of any party that practices voter suppression. And that's what the Republican Party is all about these days.
For me, about the situation where it goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier, about what was going on in Kenosha and in Portland and around the country. The vast majority, so people are aware, as yesterday, there were approximately 2,700 protest marches on behalf of Black Lives Matter in some, variation of a theme having to do with civil unrest and of the system. And the president has chosen to suddenly embrace something he did before, and that is the domestic terrorism concept. Except for he's talking about this being anarchists. Now, again, if you go back and do the fact checking, which is what we do here, according to the Justice Department, this is President Donald Trump's Justice Department, and according to information that was put together by the Department of Homeland Security, again, under President Trump, the white supremacist organizations and the far right organizations outnumber the quote unquote leftist anarchist Antifa side in the United States by 37 to 1. The disturbances, vigilante situations that we've seen in Portland and in Kenosha, ironically, have been done by the white supremacist groups. In the case of Portland, where they had the caravan of trucks that drove through town with the paintballs that they were shooting protesters with. And in Kenosha, with the young man who was from Illinois, who brandished an AK-15, shot two people, and literally in front of the police left and was arrested, not in Wisconsin, back in his home in Illinois. Yet he was on videotape walking the streets of Kenosha. I think sometimes, and we know this, you and I have had numerous discussions about what happened in our old neighborhood in Squirrel Hill. The sudden latching onto of the left anarchists that are taking over the cities, to me, it's baseless.
You are absolutely 100% correct in your assessment that it has been the white nationalists who have been the provocation of the disturbances in both Kenosha and also in Portland. The Black Lives Matter movement in Portland was one of nonviolence all these months. Trump wanted to see violence there, and his supporters who drove into town and who sprayed paintballs were acting violently. And now Trump all of a sudden says that, oh, no, that's not violence. If it had been Black Lives Matter with those paintballs, he would have said, oh, that's a violent act. The man's a racist. And that's what resulted in all the unfortunate disturbances and the shooting of one of the demonstrators from the white nationalists that occurred last Saturday night. In Kenosha, you had a situation where a 17-year-old kid comes in holding a gun illegally. It's a violation. He's an underage kid who was looking for trouble, and he ended up killing two people. That was another example of white nationalist provocation, and he was a Trump supporter. The public is starting to see this for what it is. That's where America, I think, has changed for the better all these years. But we have to be on guard. Any kind of provocation from any source, I don't care what race it is, I don't care what political ideology it is unacceptable. But we have to be willing to call everything for what it is. And what we have going here now is an America that Trump is trying to unhinge.
Okay, let's take a quick look at what's happening. I mean, we know this is a holiday weekend. It's Labor Day, and we've had upticks in the coronavirus every time that we've had a major holiday weekend. So before we get into this question of what's going on, I want to take this moment to do a quick public announcement. If you choose to go out and celebrate this holiday, whether it's a backyard cookout or whether it's to the beach you want to go, please remember to wear a mask. Please remember to social distance. Please remember to wash your hands. You're doing that as much for other people as you are for yourself. So I'm just begging you to follow the guidelines. It's really important because we've lost 185,000 people to the coronavirus. It is a big and need you to start. Okay. All right. Here's what's going on, Mr. Steinberg, and we'll do some quick hits on coming up this week. Now, coming up later today, the NATO basically looked to sanction Russia. And I think it'll be interesting to see whether or not how we handle the NATO calling out of Russia. We have Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin, who've actually done a lot of deals together, starting with NAFTA 2.0 and going through a number of different things, including getting the stimulus bill through. Mnuchin and Pelosi have tentatively come across an agreement to keep the government working through September. And Mark Meadows, who is the former congressman from the state of North Carolina, who hired from that post to become the White House chief of staff to President Trump, has not been involved in these normal discussions, but he will get involved as they get ready to try to do a stimulus. I think Mnuchin and Pelosi would have had a stimulus deal done had it not been for Meadows, but person. So Senate comes back next week. Do we get a stimulus package? And any comments on anything having to do with the situation?
From what I have read, from what I have heard, Steve Mnuchin is a person that Nancy Pelosi can deal with. And they can reach compromises and they can advance the agenda, particularly for those Americans whose economic welfare has been just devastated from the pandemic. The problems are Meadows, who Mark Meadows was a hardcore member of the Tea Party, and he stands in the way. But also, you have the growing influence of Peter Navarro, who is just a bad human being. There were extensive stories in the Washington Post about his sexism and about the hostile work environment he's created in the White House. This is a very bad scene. And as such, he is a serious obstacle to getting anything done to the whole climate in Washington. And you combine that with Donald Trump himself, and you have a toxic mix. So I'm very worried. I don't know if anything's going to be advanced. I think that I have never seen government in all my years more unhinged than it is right now.
The other part of the equation at this point is, even if there was a stimulus package, now let's say they're supposedly $1 trillion apart. If they split it and were willing to do that, which seems to be what Mnuchin and Pelosi are willing to do, but Meadows isn't, there is a problem in the Senate with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and that is he's got a handful of Republican senators who do not want to give the American public any, a dime more. And we're talking about 4 or 5 of those senators. It's quite conceivable that even if McConnell wanted to, and we're giving a big assumption there, even if McConnell wanted to bless whatever deal Mnuchin and Pelosi were able to broker, it might not even make it through the Senate.
Well, that's true. McConnell has one big problem on his hands also. He could lose his reelection bid to Amy McGrath. Right. So Kentucky is a state. It's one of those states that's going from red to purple. They have Bashir now, who is a Democrat governor.
Mm-hmm.
And, the climate out there has been influenced by the horrific murder of, Breonna Clark or
Right.
Breonna Taylor?
Yeah.
Breonna Taylor. So you have all this at stake in Kentucky. McConnell has to show some give. Otherwise, he not only will lose his majority, he will lose his seat. So I think he's going to try to maneuver. I'm a little more hopeful regarding him than I am of others at this point. Not that I value him as an individual, but I think he has a survival instinct.
Well, yeah, that'd be tested. As you recall, when the first bill came through, he went to his caucus and said, "Look, you guys are going to have to hold your nose and let this go by." The second time around, he's got guys like from Florida. He's got a couple, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. He's got a few other senators who are hell bent on saying, no money. We are where we are. So he's going to have to do some serious whip to get those votes up there. But we'll see. I mean, this is where the president, if there's a deal on the table, and if Meadows allows Mnuchin and Pelosi to broker that deal, it can get done if the president pushes bully pulpit on Mitch McConnell. But right now, let's don't get ahead of ourselves. We have no idea where that's going. The final thing on this one with NATO and Russia, something in my, I hate to think this, but something in my head thought, well, wait a minute, if NATO does this, and we're part of the Security Council, NATO's, sort of part of the NATO alliance, not the Security Council. It's the United Nations. My apologies. We push Russia. Do you think, and we've seen this, Mattis talked him out of it first time. Is there any way that over the weekend we pull out of NATO?
I don't know if Trump would go that far. There's a lot of evidence that Putin really has some kind of blackmail power over him, which that Trump has keep denying. I think he does have some sort of blackmail power. I think that when this administration is all over, we'll find out what it was. But I think that Trump's political advisors would be resistant to him going that far. He's losing this election. He's going to lose this election. But there's only so much gasoline they can allow to be poured on a fire.
So you think we're safe from exiting NATO?
I don't think it will happen, but I don't put anything past Donald Trump.
Okay, so
I think his political advisors will prevail upon him.
Okay. I don't think he will either, but it's just something that I thought in the back of my mind. I know that on a number of times he's been very adamant about the possibility of pulling out, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It's worth discussing, put it that way.
Yeah, where's the thought? So it's shameless plug time, Alan. You're writing a bunch of stuff this week. We've posted a bunch of it on News Talk Florida, and you have it, of course, on your New Jersey Insider, Insider New Jersey. I got her backwards there.
Correct.
Which is a fantastic publication. Highly recommend. Check them out. What's going on this week, brother?
Well, I'm continuing to write about what I feel is the backfire of the Trump law and order message. I wrote a column yesterday about the woman who I think is from New Jersey who's becoming a national figure, and I think she's a Democratic superstar. I think she's a future governor in New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill. You see her a lot on shows like Bill Maher, and you'll see her in others as well. but she's coming superstar. She's a superstar already. She's a graduate of Annapolis, helicopter pilot, very highly regarded person in Washington. She's a star in this election and for elections to come.
Cool. All right. Well, then we will follow that. Follow you on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle there, bud?
Yeah, A Steinberg at A Steinberg 613, Alan Steinberg, and you also on Facebook, Alan Joel Steinberg. I used the middle name my parents gave me. Joel, Alan Joel Steinberg.
All right, Alan Joel Steinberg. We will put all that in the show box below. Thanks for joining us, as always, and we'll be back with some final thoughts right after this. Hey, folks, let's talk a little bit about my new friends at Ground News. Now, it's an app that I've got on my phone, and we're all newsies, right? I mean, let's be honest. You wouldn't be listening to the Politically Incorrect podcast if you didn't like the news. And, you know, one of the things we like about the news, or we hope to like about the news, is that the news is not BS. That we know that the news we're getting is real news and not news that has a slant to it one way or the other. Well, there's a way to make certain that you know that the news you are getting, where it's coming from, whether it's slanted one way or the other. Look, in many ways, all news, in some ways, are biased, right? I mean, reporters may add biased language consciously or unconsciously, but the outcome's the same. You get biased news, and it impacts how you see the world. Now, Ground News is a brand new app, and it's easy to get it at the Google Play Store. You can get it at the App Store for those of you who are on the Apple devices, and it's free. You can download it. It provides readers with objective data about the underlying political bias in published news stories. Now, again, as we said before, either consciously or unconsciously, there is always a little bit of bias. But how much? And where's it coming from? Well, that's what Ground News does. Ground News synthesizes this for you and breaks it down in a fascinating way. It's truly fascinating. It's, frankly, it's a groundbreaking first ever news comparison platform. There's nothing like it. Ground News collects data from over 50,000 news sources, runs it in real-time media bias tracking. Then the coverage bias rating is given visually shown alongside the story. So for every story you read, you can compare how reporting differs across sources with different political biases, see if the coverage of the story skews more to the left or to the right. Hopefully, it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, this is a news person's dream, okay? This is geek out stuff, okay? You guys are going to freak out about it. It is so much fun. Ground News represents the larger movement of people who, frankly, are fed up with traditional high politicized news. No one wants to be spoon-fed ideas, suddenly influenced. No way. Don't want that. Ground News gives power to the people so you can make up your own mind. And look, if I know anything about you folks who follow us on the Politically Incorrect podcast, you all have your own minds. I've been on Twitter with you. I know. This, my friends, is going to be something you're going to have a lot of fun with. But at the same time, and I really don't want this to go unnoticed, at the same time you're having fun and being able to really use their little meter to decide which, where's it coming from? Is this a highly conservative publication? Is it a highly liberal publication? Where is it on the spectrum? It is a lot of fun, but more importantly, you know where that news is coming from, and you know how close to the middle it really is. And look, that's all you can ask for, folks. But I'll tell you what, because Ground News are such cool people, and because they like the Politically Incorrect podcast, they're going to give us a deal. All right. So all this information, by the way, is going to be in the show box below. But pay attention. Okay, you ready? All you want to do right now is head over to ground.news / my last name Williams. That's ground.news / my last name Williams, WILLIAMS. Enter the code, my name, Williams, to get 1 month free of Ground News Pro as an exclusive limited time offer. Listeners to the Politically Incorrect podcast will get 20% off. That's 20% off Ground News Premium memberships. Okay? Let me repeat that. For those of you who listen to us right here on the Politically Incorrect podcast, you're going to get 20% off Ground News Premium membership. So that's something you're going to want. So what are you waiting for? Start judging the truth for yourself and start today. That's right. Go out to ground.news / Williams. That's ground.news / Williams. Enter the promo code Williams. Get 1 month free of Ground News Pro. And for a limited time, you can get 20% off Ground News Premium memberships. All right. So look, folks, all the information is in the show box below. Go there now. Sign up. Ground News. You're going to want it. You're going to need it as we get through the next 65 days trying to decide just exactly who's telling the truth in the media. Welcome back, everybody. Now, if you're not one of the 5,000 people who've already taken time to subscribe to the podcast, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, we certainly do make it simple. It's free. Find us at the Apple Podcast Store, same over at the Google Podcast Store. You can find us on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, as well as iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and, of course, YouTube, to name a few. Now, for some reason, you can't seem to find us. Well, if you have an assistant device like Alexa or Google or the Apple products, which answers the Siri, you can simply say, hey, Google, play the latest edition of the Politically Incorrect podcast with Jim Williams, and it'll do it for you. Okay, that's pretty cool and very simple. Now, if for some reason you still can't find us, out the old Google machine, type in the Politically Incorrect podcast with Jim Williams, hit the favorite button, the subscribe button, and each week we have a brand new edition of the podcast sent directly to your phone, your tablet, or to both. Okay, go out and do that today as we really ramp up for the final 60 days. That's it, folks. 60 days from now to the election. So, gotta say, it's getting to crunch time, and we'll be right there for everything for you. Keep a lookout because we're going to be doing some multiple podcasts over the course of the week. So, by all means, be sure to keep a lookout for that too. All right. If you have any questions, obviously you can always on Twitter, which most of you do, at JW Media DC. That's JW Media DC. Or you can check me out on Instagram at Jim Williams 200. That's Jim Williams 200 on Instagram. And on Facebook, it is Jim Williams Examiner. So, social media aspects, you can get to me, and it will be listed in the show box below. Okay? All right, cool. To our buddy, Alan Steinberg. He will be back with us next week. And we will be bringing on at least one, perhaps two guests next week as well, who they will be dependent upon how to go with regard to what the news items and issues are of the day. So we'll look out, we'll let you know, and I'll let you know early via Twitter as soon as we decide where to go with that next week. But we're just 60 days out. This weekend, early voting begins in the state of North Carolina. From this point forward, early voting in a number of states. If you're not sure if your state has early voting, be sure to check out the websites for each state, and I'm sure that they will be able to give you that information. Also, plan on voting by mail. Cannot tell you other than this. It is safe, absolutely 100% safe. By all means, if you're going to vote by mail, request a ballot. The moment you get it, fill it out. Make certain that you've checked all of the information on the ballot with regard to how you fill it out, how you properly address the labels on the envelope, and quickly get it in the mail, okay? This is going to be a very important election. We all know that. Regardless of who your candidate is in this election, you want your vote to count. So be certain there's early voting and you feel comfortable enough to go out in this pandemic world. By all means, do it. Be prepared to stand in line for a while. If you choose to do the mail-in voting, something I've been doing since 1980 because I usually work on election day, means do it. But again, the two things I urge you: ask for the ballot now, and once you get it, fill it out, check all of the information on the envelope to what you need to do to make certain that ballot gets counted, okay? So cross your T's and dot your I's on that one. Folks, it's been a difficult and a long week, but we're going through this together, and we respect for all of us out there. So let's as we get ready for this Labor Day weekend, or if you are going to go out, if you're going to see some friends or do what it is you're going to do this holiday weekend, that you take every precaution not to make yourself vulnerable to any possible coronavirus by wearing a mask, by social distancing, be good old-fashioned common sense, okay? All right, well, thank you for joining us this week. We will see you next time right here on the Politically Incorrect Podcast. I'm Jim Williams for Steinberg. Have a very safe holiday weekend.